Yo, 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 what's happening, everyone? It's Tone coming in at you with a little informative film that we're doing here today in the spirit of hollow fly tying. I've been doing quite a few of those and just wanted to do a quick one about how we can very easily in steps jazz up our hollow flies, adding shoulders, accents, in minimal step requirements. So this one was just an example, one of the few that I did leading up to this. Ooh, it's got a little hook in that peacock I gotta take care of, which I will deal with and show you as we move along. So for these, I'm just using some upturned I2-aughts, keeping it pretty simple. This one in particular, I'm gonna go a little bit louder on the color, hoping that some more vibrant color contrast will actually help in the demonstration of these things. Maybe you'll get a chance to see it better, maybe you won't, who knows, but I always need one of these for my own box, so we'll make it all right. I kind of laid out some steps in my mind for this that we'll go through. So first things first, laying a good thread base on there. This is a great example of some practice for thread control. Thread control is of the utmost importance while you're doing hollow flies. Especially a lot of different bucktail techniques, you're going to find that it's going to be super helpful for you to understand how to work the thread with your corresponding materials and be able to achieve what you would like within, the parameters of your material and your abilities, I guess. And hopefully we can increase those abilities. So, what I'm doing is nothing special. I'm just looking at this piece of bucktail right now, trying to figure out where the hell I want to take everything from. There are plenty of other videos about that stuff to get your selection ideas for section of the bucktails. So, I'll leave that kind of up to you. I guess the main goal in this video was to move through it a little bit quicker, just to demonstrate a couple of techniques. So I'm not trying to take up too much of anybody's time with this. There's nothing new to what we're doing here. It's just a little bit of flair showing you at what points you can jazz up certain patterns, increasing your confidence in tying styles. And we're just gonna start. I'll give a few relatively loose wraps. This one I took from probably the bottom 20% of the tail, so it's gonna have a lot of good natural flair to it under tension. So I'm gonna roll this back kind of loosely, and you see how it's kinking very easily. Pull it up to my position while I'm gonna rock this tail on the top 180 degrees of the shank. Sometimes you can go full 360 around the shank, but for these, I don't mind a little less material on the bottom towards the back because it gives a little bit more of a belly scoop with the material. So it's like a little harder scoop up, which I kind of enjoy, especially for these. So lay your bucktail down as a base. I'll come back and I grab two flat wing hackles. I want to make sure, and these are just a little bit kinky because they're for me. You know how it is. Well, if I pulled on the right one, maybe we'll get, I want to get them kind of close. I like to stagger them. So for this, I'll be pulling right up to the edge of this. That'll put me about 6.5. Take that down, strip a little bit of fluff off the ends and come back with my pliers, give it a nice flattening right at the end so that my tie-in points, when I keep my thread wraps nice and straight, I'll be able to stack these perfectly on top of one another. Now again, start it nice and loose, get it in position. Once I'm ready to lock down, give a good set of cinching wraps with some more tension, and then work the tension all the way back so you're locking those feathers in position. All right, perfect. if life were all about tails, I'll tell you what, you know, this is my favorite part of every fly. If I could do nothing but tie tails for people, I'd probably do it. All right, so I usually have number standards for stuff like this. Little pieces of crystal flash when I'm going in the tail, I'll usually do 5. And then kind of pull that a little bit to length, some dash shorter than the tips of those tails, just so you can see the flash fluttering below. And hold that right on top as we anchor that in position. All right. Okay. So all of that is nice and straight on top. Again, you know, when we give this a nice bath, it'll take some of the kink with air drying out of that hackle itself. It's got a little bit of a swoop in the belly, which I do like, but it'll come out for sure. So first thing here, we're gonna do, we did our bucktail. I did along the top 180. Sometimes, depending on what profile you're trying to achieve, you can do a 360 around there, flare it with a straight tie, and then tie it back to get your angles right for that bucktail to swoop in and create the tail evenly on both the top and the bottom. But I just went for the 180 tie on the top side of the shank. A little bit of hackle, a little bit of flash, good to go for your tail section. Now we're going to get into the first hollow. I'm going to go back to this tail and stare at it for a minute while I figure out what I want to take from. It's starting to get a little thin, so my options are not limitless at this point. Try to get some good stuff from about the midsection because I want a little bit of flare, but with this tail, it's going to be mostly about the texture of it. A little bit of waviness. Obviously not too straight, nice and soft. And this one's going to be obviously a hollow 360-degree tie around the shank. So come back across here, make sure I take any of this fluff, this shorter material out from about an inch and a quarter up from the base that I cut it. And then just check my length on it. I can go all the way with that pretty easily and it'll still be a good taper. So first hollow tie, come in here, just make sure all the butts are cleaned up a little bit so I've got a nice clean tie-in point. Bring it right to the front side of that dam where my thread is locked in position. And sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 wraps. I'll start with 2 just to show, and then I give a little bit of a kink in there while holding the tension on the front end of it so it doesn't rotate torsionally around the shank of the hook. Instead, it will kink so that it's not going to be able to, the material won't be able to move forward or backward, assuming that the base that you laid it on was completely straight and not on a taper there. That tension is going to hold it one way, and then by creating that tension, when I release my own tension on the front of it, I should be able to spin this around a little bit, increase that tension, and then I'll just use my thumb and forefinger and fingernails to leave that back where I want it. Distribute those fibers evenly, and I kind of reset the tension, make sure everything looks like it's pretty well distributed there. And then just give it a little final check. I mean, if you got the time to make it the way that you want, your overall finished profile is going to be better for it. So if you got the time, take the time. So that looks pretty good to me. And take my trusty 223 here. And then just make sure all this distribution looks pretty solid and even to me. Push that back, capture all of those fibers, and just start kind of training them. And that's a good pull right there. So I'll hold these back, jump up to the front outside of those fibers. lay down a quick base, and then just make sure that everything running up to where that dam is going to butt into is nice and straight, perpendicular to the shank of the hook. So we've got a nice clean line. When we tie concentric wraps, we're actually moving all of the material forward with the dam at the same time, so you don't get any uneven buildup or warping within the cone of your dam. That is something super important to think about when you're tying, especially in this kind of style. When you're damming up, you want to make sure that everything stays as straight vertically as possible. So, you know, when I'm rolling up to it, I'm not putting a ton of tension down when I'm shaping the cone itself. Wrapping, holding maybe a little bit more loosely as we get to the top to get that shape and the angle out of it, which I'm still going to work a little bit here, apparently. So that is still a little bit sticking out much for my liking. So I'll just hold that in position and come back and wrap a few more closer up, come back down, lock that in position, come back up, lock those wraps in place. And again, you know, this will kind of work itself down once it gets a nice bath and it gets a good angle and swoop to it, but your primary angle is very important. So you kind of know the maximum at which it'll flare out. And you know, obviously you could put tension on this and flare it back out to all hell and, you know, do whatever the hell you want to do. That's the beauty of thread control. And trust me, I am not the first person to say that. I've been watching too many videos recently of a lot of great reputable tires, and you know, they all talk about it. So consider the importance. So with that, I'm confident in that shape. I'm going to bring this all back down and take it to the front end of that dam where we're going to do our second tie-in point. This one, I'll grab some more of this bucktail over here. I'm going to do a little bit sparser than that guy so we have more control over it. There's going to be material stacked up on top of this second hollow tie-in. So we're not going to need as much material to fill in. The bucktail is basically just acting as a support for it. So, I mean, again, we got the same principles. The kink that you're going to put in it to hold the tension so it doesn't slide front to back. And that tension is always super important. When you have enough tension that you create a kink in your material at the beginning part of a hollow tie, you're actually reinforcing the idea of having your threads, your concentric wraps, you know, touching in vertical the whole way. It's a cleanliness thing in the fly as much as it is an effect of the actual tie-in. So I'll try and get this thing to length here. I'm gonna go a little bit longer on it than some people might enjoy, but that's just kind of my style here. So I leave enough of a butt to touch up to the top of that dam from our last hollow tie-in point. Give 2 wraps, kink that all down, create a little bit of flare so you know you got your tension up, and then give another wrap to hold that tension a little better. And then I'll spin her and then distribute. And you always want to keep a little bit of tension. Sometimes I'll let it free up if you really need to work it around more than you had hoped. And then come back and keep that position on the back side of it. Increase the tension in the thread. Give a couple to lock that amount of tension and start working back. Work again forward. That actually looks pretty good. Nice and snug all the way up to the front there. Grab my handy dandy 2-2 tree and make sure my distribution is good. Pull that through in position. Now, one thing I don't like is how far forward this moved on me, or how far forward I set it. It didn't move on me at all. Knowing that I'm gonna have to build a dam and come on back, I'm gonna actually pull these fibers forward just a little bit more in this step. So where I rocked my thread forward to start on the outside to build the dam, I'm just going to continue it a few more wraps to gain a little bit more purchase towards the hook eye. So again, keeping the tension up with that, walking it forward just a little bit, holding the tension in my hand, grabbing my custom push tool here, making sure that looks pretty, everything in place, and that looks a little better. So come out, wrap around, pull forward, lock it down, make sure everything is nice and straight, and then start building that dam right in front of it. Ooh. Sounds like someone's bobbin needs a little grease, huh? Squeak, 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 squeak. All right, now that's got some pretty good flare. That'll all tone down. Nice. I just want to make sure it's as consistent as it's going to be. Because once we start locking everything in place, it's going to be really hard to deal with any of that if you need to fix something. So it might look a little bit crazy now, but the lines, the angles, everything's making sense to me. So I'll just come put another couple wraps to keep that snug. And here's time where we add our shoulders. So for this one, like I was saying, we're going a little bit loud on this thing. I got some pink, and right at the length that I want to cut them. Ooh, that's not a great feather. What the hell is that? Well, I'm gonna use it anyway, because that's fine. Yeah, it's got a little bit more fuzz than I'm used to using, so I feel like give a little bit more vibrant color to the head area of this fly. So I'm gonna bring my thread back up to the top of this dam. So you're gonna be locking everything in place as far as tension and the thread positioning while you're moving it back up forward from the last layer of thread work that you did. And this one, I'm gonna hang this feather to kind of create the effect of shoulders here. And get 3 or 4 tight wraps on it in position. You wanna angle it up just enough where maybe you're hitting, you know, somewhere between the 22.5 and 45 degree angle, because you're gonna be at the bottom of the spine material that we're going to throw on top of it, so you still get the effect of the barring. You're not going too high. You could go for different effects, like you can, you know, if you're thinking about front to back from the eye, the shank of the hook, you know, 360 degrees, you can do veiling over the top 180, gets your 45 degree points. You can do them, you know, perfectly side by side. You know, one straight on the top. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. It's just nerd shit. But, you know, that's why we love it. So with these things, I mean, you can resin glue them in place if you want. I'll show you a technique that I usually try to do. Let me get this thing in position first here. So while I'm pinching it in place, I'm doing some loose wraps to hold that in position with my thread tension. And once it gets to the elevation I want, I'm going to pinch that position still and start putting a little bit tension on my way down so that I can come back in, nip these ends without any complications. Maybe. We'll see here, huh? Thought I was going to snip the thread on that one for sure. All right, and when you're working your way back up, you're basically increasing the tension and locking the position of your previous tie layer. So that looks pretty good. It's set from just a little bit above the halfway point on there, and it'll act as shoulders. When you take these and just kink them outwards just a little bit. So it'll help increase the density, you know, widthwise, the actual shoulder sections of the fly. Again, like I say, you can resin or glue these things in place. Sometimes I will put, you know, a dab of glue right on the bend where it starts flaring out for the shoulder work for these hackles. You know, it's the definition that it offers, the barring for the effective scaling within a fish if you're doing bait fish emulation like this. Kinking it out, helping it secure it in position as well. These are all very important things. Also back down to thread control. So now that we've increased the tension on it, we don't have to worry about any of our material moving as we continued with increased tension throughout this fly. So I mean, this is as tight as it's gonna go before snapping. I'm just wrenching down on the thing. And we've got 2 spine sections to handle on top of this. So for this, we just got some squimpish fibers. It's a nice pink blend here. And I want to grab an adequate but not overwhelming amount. So what I'm gonna do with this is cut out a little section here and then start from about, actually I cut a piece of patch off with it. How about that? So that feels a little bit thick for what I want. So I'm gonna come up to about the inch and a half area and start stripping out all that lower fluff to it because there is a natural taper in the length of the material. I'll pull back up to the 2-inch mark, start stripping that, and basically till I get the density that I want for this spine material to take over. I feel like I'm right about there. Take all the tips. And then give my fingers a little bit of clearance here. A few quick wraps just to hold it lightly in position. Again, there's not a whole lot of tension on this thing right now. And then just use your thumb or fingernail, whatever you have at your disposal, to be able to distribute this. For this kind of fly, I mean, I would probably go the top of 180 would be nice, hanging off the very sides of it, just so you can really see that the barring in that hackle. I might not go so low as that 180 degree, like the side to side. So mark your position, come back up, increase, lock that position in place, come back down, increase the tension, and clean that up. So now that I've got a smooth transition, all the tension that I want, I'm gonna take this material, put a little kink in it, so that when I come back and resin over the front of this after we do our peacock spine, that kink is gonna secure those angles in the material between the peacock spine and the squimpish hair. So it doesn't lay too flat. It'll have a little bit of a hump coming up the front and stay a little bit slimmer profile along the top edge of it. But just that first hump, I wanna keep in place. So this naturally does have a good amount of taper to the material. As you can see, the fibers are kind of staggered in length all the way up, but I'm gonna take it here and refine the taper a little bit. So when I hold it, I try to pull it so you can kind of tell the fibers that are running from front to back along the section that you tied. And at a certain point, I will just start shaving. To kind of accentuate that taper. Now, that should be all tied in place there as well as it goes. Untangle and free up all this stuff. I mean, this isn't going to be the prettiest until she gets a nice bath, but you see what we're getting at here. And then for the final piece, little peacock curl. And for bigger flies like this, 6, 7, 8 inches plus, I like to do 6 or 7 pieces, whichever I pull first. This one is actually only 5, so unfortunately, this one we're going 6. All right, then I'm gonna try and find the natural curl to it. So usually all of these little tips, the ends of the barbules here, are going to be swooping in one direction. Sometimes it's different depending on from where they were plucked, how they were stored, etc. So if you hold it a little bit above there, nice and flat, you'll be able to see what these feathers want to do naturally. And you see one that's a little bit goofy, it's just got a twist in it towards the mid side right here. But the rest of them are pretty good. We're gonna check the length on that, and that's about where I want to be, where my fingers are now. So just to manage the shape, I'm going to take my thumbnail and rip that through till about here. Give that little bend in it. So that's gonna hug the top side of that profile. And then once I tie that in, I'll get a little swoop using the same method on the back side of it. So tie that down, get a little bit of tension, and then I'm just gonna come back and check the position because I want this to lay directly on top. And now that that's locked in position, I can come back to the front side here, snip that down, drag this forward. Woo! Felt that, I skipped right over. And basically clean this up. Now, that is pretty much everything I want. I'm gonna make sure that you're holding this straight so they're all facing the right direction in that peacock. And again, same thing, only when I come back towards this tail about 2 or so inches away, I'm going to take my index fingernail on top of my thumb and just run that. So after it's wet and when it dries out, it should put a little bit of a scoop back there in the tail. All of that's nice and clean. Get my whip finishing tool. Ooh, what was that? See that thing? I put a little bit too much tension on it and it spun out on me. So I'm gonna clean that up because that'll drive me crazy. Come back through. Give it a second whip finish. Because, you know, whatever. I ain't worried. All right. So now that we got that, we're ready to resin the head. Again, when I was talking about the kinking of the material in the front here. So these squimpish fibers in this peacock, you know, you don't want it to go too high, but knowing that some of the resin is going to soak through and attach to some of these fibers, and that's going to hold that angle of the position of the front end of that profile in place. So use that to your advantage. Just gonna put some through so it soaks in right there. I'm not running up onto it at all. It's just right at the joint where that material kinks from the tie-in point. So I just like to make sure I've got enough that it soaks in everywhere that it can. It's got a nice clean finish over the top, and maybe I'll just put a little extra blob right there, smooth it out, rotate it, smooth and level all of that liquid. Really cook that in. And then, just check everything. Everything looks pretty good. Your levels, your distribution. I see, waiting to see if this is gonna handle itself as far as the swoop and the peacock that I was trying to take out. But yeah, this is what she's gonna look like pretty much. Nice little hollow fly. These tips will come back, don't worry about it. Once they all tangle and form and ease up, that's what you're looking at. But I tried to make it a quick one. Unfortunately, for some informative stuff, it's not that easy to make them that quick, but hopefully there was something in this video that you learned, some technique that makes things a little bit easier for you or easier to understand. And if you got any questions or comments, please let me know. I'm down for ideas, collaborations, whatever you want to do, as long as we are continuing the craft and helping make other people better and keep people interested in the craft of fly tying. So that's pretty much all I got. Check out any of my other stuff. That's Tone with 3 underscores on Instagram, tonescustomflies.com. Hopefully I'll be able to get some more videos and stuff down soon, but we are always churning some flies. So again, hit me up, let me know what you think, let me know what you want to see. We'll be in touch soon. Peace.